alternative healing, and more. It features real people who claim to have experienced the other side of everyday existence. Today, on The Other Side.
When you have doctors who take away hope, what do you have left? Despair.
For a coma victim with almost no chance for survival.
He's not dead, so let's go from there. And that was my hope.
This man was a miraculous guide back to life.
I don't know what I can do. I just know I can come and try.
An emotion-filled hour of hope, determination, and courage.
Coma is another state of consciousness.
A tale of triumph against all odds. Today.
Welcome to The Other Side. What can you do when the odds are stacked against you and everything has gone wrong and is about to get worse? Our show today deals with people who are faced with the worst choice you can get, no choice at all. But somehow they went up against the odds and won. Their experiences are incredible and the lessons that we can learn are profound. Joining us is Kendra Parfit. Recently, Kendra was faced with one of these agonizing situations. Thank you for joining us, Kendra. Kendra, you were the first one to know that something was very wrong with your father. What happened?
I came home from work back in April or May, and my dad was sitting on his bed, getting ready to go to bed, and he was shaking really bad, and I didn't know what to do, so I called his doctor, and his doctor called us back and told me to rush him to the hospital. And I rushed him to the hospital, and other doctors looked at him, and they couldn't find anything wrong with him. And within a couple of weeks, we found out that part of his heart was enlarged and that he had to do surgery, or else soon it would be death.
And so he had the surgery?
Yes.
And what happened?
He came out of surgery, and the doctors told us that he would be awake later on that evening, and he didn't wake up, and 2 days later they told us that he was in a coma.
He was in a coma?
Yeah, and he woke up 3 weeks later.
Okay. Well, when we come back, we'll not only hear how Kendra turned the odds around, we'll meet the living proof. Stay with us.
Later on The Other Side.
Chances of survival was maybe 1 in 100.
Despite the odds, some coma victims do recover. Meet the man whose groundbreaking work has brought these people back to our world.
Welcome back to The Other Side. Tom Parfit had been trapped in a coma for 21 days with little chance of ever coming back. But his son Todd and his ex-wife Karen refused to give up, and soon their determination paid off. Thank you for joining us, folks. Todd, tell us what the doctors told you when the surgery ended.
Well, following the surgery, which was on a Wednesday, the cardiac surgeon came in and told us that the procedure went well, there was no complications, and as long as everything went according to plan, he'd be waking up in about, 8 to 10 hours. The time came and went, needless to say, and he again came back and said that due to his size, it may take a little bit longer time. The following morning, we again talked with him, and he was a little bit concerned at the fact that Dad hadn't woken up yet and hadn't come through. And they started to look at maybe running some other tests. But again, they weren't too worried because his size was still an issue. The next day, they performed a CAT scan, and a neurologist came in and evaluated the CAT scan, and it said that my father had suffered from a series of strokes, anywhere from 1 to however many, and that his chances of survival was maybe 1 in 100. And pretty much we should just give up and call it quits. We really decided not to, and it was important to me to make sure that we gave every opportunity to Dad and kept going and made sure that we allowed him every opportunity to recover and continue. We called in other doctors, we called in different people, different specialists. Every time the word came back that it was hopeless, to give up, and that he'd never recover, and if he did recover from the coma, that he would remain in a vegetable state the rest of his life.
You were facing a situation millions of families have faced, which is literally, what do? Do you continue to hope, or do you just let go? You decided not to honor this living will idea to hope. Tell us about that.
As a lot of patients do before they go into this type of surgery, my father had drafted up a living will. Him and I had sat down and discussed what was mentioned and what to do in the event of anything happening. In Dad's will, I assume it was the standard one, he had asked that after a period of 7 days that any life support be withdrawn. And if there was no life support given, that at the end of a 14-day period that the intravenous feedings be removed. Considering the fact that we were all unsure of what was the definition of life support, the only thing that Dad had was he was hooked up to the respirator just to keep his airways open. He was breathing on his own. All of his body was functioning on his own. Everything that you and I consider doing normally, he was handling. So we ran into some difficulty in interpreting it. At the end of the 14-day period, we began to experience some tremendous pressure from the hospital, again saying that it's hopeless, you're living in a dream world, he'll never come through, he'll never recover.
Karen, you had a feeling that Tom was still there, didn't you?
Yeah. I knew all along that Tom was okay. I'm a Christian Scientist, and we believe that there is more to life than this physical body. Life is spiritual. And I just knew that Tom was okay.
Did the doctors believe you?
Oh, heavens no. They thought I was pretty crazy and that it was probably about time I wake up and accept reality that Tom was not going to make it. I just had to deny everything they said because I knew it just was. Tom was all right. That's all there was to it.
You then contacted a man, Roger Borde,
right,
to help you. How did he help you?
Well, it's amazing what Roger did. There was no logical reason that anybody could explain that we would get in contact with Roger, but he came down during that second week, and both Todd and I had talked to him on the telephone beforehand, and Tom and I had delved in the metaphysical probably about 15 years ago, and Roger said to both Todd and I on the phone, there's more to life. He says, life is spiritual. And I thought, good, this has a chance. We'll see what can happen. The hospital thought we had found somebody out on the street and brought him in to visit with Tom. And Roger spent 2 days with Tom around the clock. And he not only helped Tom, but he did wonderful things for the whole family. On Tuesday, before Roger came, Todd was ready to call all his dad's friends to come say goodbye. On Thursday, after Roger got there, Todd was on the phone that night calling his dad's friends to come help in the ways that Roger had suggested.
Well, we're happy to say that your dad is alive and well, and he's joined us in the studio today. Let's all welcome Tom Parker. Welcome, Tom. It's a very emotional experience for you. Is it just to be here?
Yes, sir.
Be alive?
Yes, sir.
What do you think about all this?
Oh, I don't know. I guess I wasn't ready to go.
Wasn't your time to go?
That's right.
You feel like your family pulled you back?
Yeah.
Have you ever met this man who helped you?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the pleasure of meeting him.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're thrilled that you're here.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you're wondering, that same thing I am. What kind of man can bring people back from a coma? Well, when we come back, we're going to meet him. Stay with us.
When the other side continues.
There are points at which it may be hopeless and it may be cruel to keep somebody on life support.
Where our medical knowledge ends, this man's talents begin. Stay with us.
Next guest, Dr. Bruce Hensel, medical and science editor for KNBC TV and assistant professor of medicine at UCLA, has some answers. Welcome, Dr. Hensel. Thanks for joining us. Doc, what's going on in the brain of somebody in a coma?
Well, first of all, you know, we've got two sides to the upper part of our brain, the cerebrum. Now, both of these sides have got to be affected for you to go into a coma. You can have a brain tumor on one side and actually never go into a coma. But if both sides are swollen, affected, decreased blood supply, metabolic problems, you can go into a coma. A coma is really something between a waking and sleeping state in some cases. In some cases, it's much deeper than that. But it can receive stimulus.
But there are, in other words, various depths of coma. There are very, very deep comas and light comas.
Absolutely. There are some light comas where people will actually respond to commands. There's something that we call stupor, which is something between being awake and alert and actually being in coma. A deep coma, the person may only be breathing. They may not even breathe on their own because they may be affected as far down as the brainstem. A mild coma, they may actually respond to commands.
Is it ever fair, then, to say that at a certain point it's hopeless?
Well, I think there are scientific tests that you can do. This is a difficult question, as you imply. You can measure brain waves, and when the brain waves are flat and there is no response whatsoever, you can say it's hopeless. But that has to go on for a certain period of time. There's a medical definition, there's a legal definition, and neither one of them probably completely answers the question. I think there's a point at which it's definitely hopeless. There's a point at which some people call it hopeless, and we have seen cases, and you've talked about them here, where it didn't turn out that that was the case. And there are some cases there's obviously hope. People have gone years in comas and still recovered.
Well, that's what science says, but Roger Borde looks at comas very differently. He believes he has the power to communicate with these lost souls. Roger, welcome. Thank you for being with us. Very interesting line of work, to work with people in comas. There was an experience you had, a turning point in your own life that led you to this. Tell us what happened.
Oh, that's correct. It was in the 70s, in 1976. What occurred is that I was working for, at that time, Exxon Research, and I was going to school at night and got my degree and started a career, and it was going well. And then 2 years after that, around Christmas of '75, my wife said she wanted a divorce. So if any of you have been through a divorce, you know what it's like. It's very traumatic. So I was going through ups and downs of depression and doubt about what I was doing, where things were going. And it finally reached, I guess, a culmination one night when, in a deep state of depression, I cried myself to sleep. And I guess the only way I can describe it is I gave out a primordial scream for help. And I didn't care what it looked like or where it came from. And I fell asleep, and the next morning when I woke up, I can just say that I saw the world in a different light. I saw things differently.
A transforming experience for you.
Yeah, it was, I can only say that it's taken all these years to put words to it. There were a lot of things happened in that instant, that night. And it's just taken a long time to see what's come of it.
And in a nutshell, you began to experience a sense of intuition or a capacity.
Well, I started having clairvoyant, clairaudient, psychokinetic experiences. I have a degree in psychology, and one of the classes I took was parapsychology, so I was aware of what was going on. However, I didn't have a guru or a teacher or someone to give me any guidance. But I was at a point that night when I let go, I was just pretty much, I pretty much let go of all belief systems, all ideas, all concepts, all goals. And another part of that's very difficult if you know anything about a society called Mensa. I belonged to Mensa at one time until I stopped paying my dues. So I have
Mensa is the genius club, isn't it? IQs of 3,050 or something?
I have an intellect that's very hard to deal with sometimes.
Yes.
So when I let go of it, it didn't mean that it happened in an instant then. I still struggle with it from time to time.
You were resistant, yeah. How did you start working with coma patients?
It was in it was in the late 80s. I met a doctor who was doing brainwave research, and he has a partner, and this partner said that they were collecting brainwave data, and they were looking for subjects, and they asked me if I would volunteer. I came in, they took some data. Well, while they were taking the data, they thought something was wrong with their equipment because they were seeing brainwaves they had never seen before. And so they messed with the machinery for about 45 minutes until they came to the conclusion it was not an artifact, that I was actually producing something they had never seen before. So they quickly had me work with another individual hooked up to a brainwave monitor, and through that work they discovered that the individual I was working on began to entrain my brainwaves. In other words, their brain started to produce the same kind of activity that I produce, and that is very high delta wave activity and very high alpha wave. And from what the researcher was telling me, that the 0.8 to 1.2, I believe it's megahertz or hertz? Megahertz. That was at the same level of an earthquake or a thunderclap. It's a very low, and it rumbles. And so he asked me one time, it was after this, he said, have you ever been sitting in a room and somebody just wants to slap you? Are they very irritated with you? And I said, yes, that's happened quite often. He said, well, what happens is that you emit, this brainwave activity is emitting some sort of energy which is unsettling to other people. And he said, when I first met you, I felt that way about you, and now I know why.
I found you a little irritating just in
I'm
the
sure
few
you
minutes I've
did.
known you.